This is the case of 10-year-old KAYLEE Owens. At about 5 p.m., February 18th of 2014, KAYLEE Owens is walking home from a friend's home. When she is walking home, she is approached by a man in a tan Ford Ranger truck, asking her for directions. As KAYLEE approaches the car further, the man pulls her into the truck and flees. Neighbors Carlos and Michelle witness the abduction. Michelle gets on the phone with 911 immediately, while Carlos runs on foot trying to capture this truck. Meanwhile, another neighbor gets in their vehicle and they are chasing down the truck as well. After a few minutes, the man in the truck is able to lose the neighbors that were following him. Meanwhile, Carlos goes door to door in the neighborhood looking for KAYLEE's parents, giving everybody a description of her. He runs into a little boy who then tells him that that sounds a lot like his sister. He then leads Carlos to KAYLEE's parents' home. Neighbor Michelle also wrote down the license plate to the truck. The license plate leads police to Jim and Regina Woods' home. They then let police know that that vehicle belongs to their 49-year-old son, Craig Woods. Once police get to Craig Woods' home, they do a further search. During their search, they do find the body of KAYLEE Owens in his basement. She was in 2 garbage bags and a storage tote. Autopsy does reveal that KAYLEE was sexually assaulted, tied up, and then she was shot in the back of the head. Craig Woods also worked at a nearby middle school for 16 years as a coach, as well as a teacher aide and a substitute teacher. Now, inside of Craig's home, they do find dozens of weapons, as well as handwritten stories by Craig about fantasies that he had about the young girls at the school that he was working for, as well as all their pictures, and some CP as well. CCTV footage also does capture Craig throwing KAYLEE Owens' clothes inside of a dumpster, as well as buying 2 bottles of bleach and some liquid plumber. November 2nd of 2017, Craig Woods is found guilty of first-degree murder against KAYLEE Owens. Now, the jury does leave the judge to decide whether or not he should get the death penalty. In 2018, the judge does decide that Craig Woods should get the death penalty. He is now currently waiting in death row.
Hello, true crimers. This is the case of KAYLEE SAWYER. KAYLEE was born on March 2nd, 1993 in Bend, Oregon. By 2016, she was attending Central Oregon Community College, and she lived very close to the campus in an apartment building, and she shared the apartment with her boyfriend, Cameron Reimhofer. On July 23rd, 2016, KAYLEE was out having a good time with her friends at a bachelorette party. About midnight, she called Cameron, her boyfriend, to pick her up, which he did. Somewhere along the way, they got into an argument, to a point when they got to the apartment complex, she said, "I'm gonna stay in the car to blow off some steam," so he went back to the apartment. After about 10 or 15 minutes, he noticed KAYLEE didn't come back up yet, so he went back out to the car, and she was gone. He did manage to speak to her through a phone conversation and text, but she was like, "No, I'm not coming home right now." And KAYLEE would never come home again. She was expected at work at a dental office she worked at the next morning, and she didn't show up, so Cameron reported her missing to the police. On July 25th, a Bend police officer by the name of Isabel Ponce Lara, that her husband Edwin killed KAYLEE. Edwin Lara was a security officer on the campus of Central Oregon Community College. Edwin would tell his wife that he accidentally struck KAYLEE with his vehicle, panicked, and then dumped her body. He told his wife that KAYLEE's belongings, pictured here, were in the shed in the back, and then he took a 9mm handgun and took off. Edwin would then take his vehicle, drive to his parents, and then take their car. The trunk of his vehicle, police would later find, had a lot of dried blood, and there was hair stuck on the rear bumper. He then drove to Salem, where he would kidnap a woman named Andrea Mays. This is the only picture of him I'm going to show, by the way. She was stopped for a moment uploading a photo to Facebook when he carjacked her. He forced her to drive to California, and there is footage of them checking into a hotel. When the car they were in broke down, they happened to see a man by the name of Jack Levy by his car. Edwin shot him in the gut, he survived, and stole his car and still kidnapped Andrea. He would then later steal another car with a family in it, in which he kidnapped the woman in the car plus the 2 kids. He told a story about how he murdered KAYLEE SAWYER, told them he had an urge to kill. He kidnapped KAYLEE, put her in the back of this vehicle where she couldn't escape. He sexually assaulted her, and then he bashed her skull in with a rock, and he kept the rock. Her body would be found a few days later. This is footage from his Facebook Live he did right before he got arrested. This is the kidnapped woman, Andrea. Cops were chasing him. He would eventually surrender. You can hear his 911 call on YouTube. He was sentenced to life in prison. Buried underneath the concrete of this basement would be the victims of two of Britain's most notorious serial killers. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Fred and Rosemary West. Viewer discretion is advised. There is a ton of detail to this story, so I have to leave a lot out. To sum up both of their childhoods, both of them grew up in households where they were sexually assaulted by their own family. There was even incestuous pregnancies. This charming couple would meet in 1969 when Rosemary was just 15 years old. Now, by the time they met, both of them had children with other people. They would also end up having 7 children together. Fred West was in prison in 1971, so one of his children, Charmaine, was being looked after by Rosemary. Rosemary didn't like having to take care of children that weren't hers, so she killed her. She killed Charmaine. She was only 8 years old. Rosemary initially buried the body in the cellar of their home, and then when Fred got back from prison, he would remove the body's fingers and then rebury her in the yard. Fred's ex-wife Rena and mother of Charlemagne went to their house to confront him, and she was then never seen again. Her body would be found much later on, and she had been dismembered. It's believed that she was strangled to death. She was then put in several garbage bags and then buried in a field. Rosemary then became a woman of the night, if you know what I mean, and she would perform her services in their home, with the children around, of course. And good old Creeper Peeper Fred here, he drilled a hole in the wall so he could watch. Some of the 7 children they had together weren't actually all his. Some of them belonged to her Johns. One of those children might have also been her own father's child. Oh my god. This is not the Brady Bunch, folks. The other children were abused, sexually assaulted, the whole shebang. In 1972, they hired Carolyn Owens to be their nanny. Well, then they kidnapped her, sexually assaulted her. When she managed to convince them, "Don't worry, I'll still be your nanny," so they wouldn't kill her, and they believed her and they let her go. She went to police. They didn't believe her. 3 months later, they would begin a murder spree. Between 1973 and 1979, they would go on to kill at least 12 women. One of them being one of their own children, Heather West. These are women that they would have abducted. Some of them were women of the night. The majority of them would be dismembered and buried underneath their basement floor. One of their children, Louise. Fred began to sexually assault her and then he video recorded it. She got up the courage to tell a friend what happened. The friend went to the police. To cut a long story short, a warrant was served. They found the bodies. Both were arrested in 1992. Both charged with multiple murders. In 1995, Fred unalived himself in his prison cell. She was convicted of 10 murders.
What would you do if someone kidnapped your 12-year-old child, sexually assaulted them, and then took them halfway across America? If your answer is shoot them dead on national television, well, then I've got a story for you. This story starts on February 19th, 1984. 25-year-old Jeff Doucette was the karate coach for Jody Pouch, and he stopped by Jody's house and convinced Mom, June, that he was just going to take him on a 15-minute ride. Just the boys. June didn't really have any reason to doubt him. He had taught 3 out of her 4 children martial arts, and they were really good friends. Jody had actually quit football and basketball in order to devote all of his time to getting better at martial arts, and so the two of them spent a lot of time together naturally. Unfortunately, that's about as positive as this video is going to be. When 15 minutes passed, 30 minutes passed, 45 minutes passed, June realized something was wrong. By nightfall, Doucette had taken them to Anaheim, California. Shaved his beard, dyed Jody's hair black so he can try and pass him off as his own son, and then checked into a cheap hotel outside of Disneyland. There, he sexually assaulted Jody for a long time until Jody requested to call his parents. Strangely enough, Doucette allowed this, and the police who were already looking for them managed to figure out where he was and track him down. Doucette is booked in Orange County, and they send Jody home on a plane to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But that wasn't enough for Jody's father. One of the police officers who tracked down Jody ended up telling Greg what happened to his son, and he said, "I'll kill that son of a bitch." Then he spent the next couple of nights going from bar to bar around town, asking questions of people. Turns out a local reporter knew exactly what time Doucette was coming back to Baton Rouge for his trial. Gary Pouch made a plan to be there when that man touched down. Pouch drove to Baton Rouge Airport. He entered the arrival area wearing a baseball cap and a pair of sunglasses, and then he went over to the payphones. He made a quick phone call, and then a news crew passed by with a group of police who were escorting Doucette through the airport. And this is a still shot of the video just before Gary Pouch pulls a gun and shoots Jeff Doucette in the head. The video, still on YouTube, has roughly 20 million views. You can also hear his friend, who is a cop, tackle him and go, "Gary, why? Why did you do it?" Pouch responds, crying, "If someone did this to your kid, you'd do it too." Everyone in Baton Rouge supported him except for the police. The locals even raised the $10,000 needed to bail him out of prison. Pouch walked away with 5 years probation and 300 hours of community service. He died in 2014 of a stroke in his late 60s. Jody released a book and gives some tips on how to avoid Jeff Doucette's.
This is one of the most baffling cases I think I have ever heard. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of JALEAYAH Davis. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. We're going to get right into this because there's a lot. On November 19th, 2011, in Marietta, Ohio, 20-year-old JALEAYAH Davis was out with some friends. She left her house around 5 p.m. She made plans to stay at a friend's house that night. At 3:28 a.m., she makes a phone call to her sister Toby. JALEAYAH asked her to come pick her up from a gas station. In the background of that call, her sister said she heard JALEAYAH say to another person, "Give me my keys." A few minutes later, JALEAYAH calls her sister back. She has now asked her sister to pick her up from a different location, which would be at a rest stop off Interstate 77. According to JALEAH's sister, JALEAYAH sounded super frazzled. Something was wrong. 15 minutes later, a 911 call would come in. There was a body in the road near mile marker 181. And again, viewer discretion is advised. The body was that of JALEAYAH Davis. She was nude from the waist up. One of her legs was broken in half. Her right breast was missing, and she had been decapitated. Her car was found 2/10 of a mile away from where her body was. The car was still running, all of the doors were locked, the headlights were on, it was in gear, there was blood on the trunk with some minor blood on the roof, the passenger side window was broken, and then there was some minor damage near the headlights. This is the craziest part. Near JALEAH's body, neatly placed along one of the guardrails, was her bra, her shirt, and her coat. In that order. Police would investigate this for a year and a half. They claimed it was an accident. Her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. They claimed she hit the guardrail at high speeds, somehow flew out the passenger side window, rolled across the roof, then over the trunk, and then smashed into the guardrail, which is what they said killed her. They then think a tractor trailer who didn't see her ran her over, causing the decapitation. This is the inside of her car. Now, they claim her shoes came off in the accident, yet her gray boot is somehow under a pile of her other belongings. And this was the extent of the damage to the car? What? Her family believes she was murdered. They think someone struck and killed her with her own car. Because how does this happen? By the way, no traces of blood or any fabric on the passenger side window. So, how does she go out the window and then roll over the... They still ruled it an accident. I say no.